That's what it is. Okay, I'm like this much.
Like you're supposed to be up there.
I cleaned out a whole bunch.
Good evening to our midweek study here at Ridge. Doing the sort of content we had in the last few weeks, a small set of some curriculum for the kids, for the first few minutes. Then we'll get into the adult class that Jeremy has sent out in the Shot in the Arm on Monday. We will open with a song. I'll go ahead if you are following along at home. We will be singing 412 as our first selection tonight. 412, Solid Rock. Trent has agreed for our opening prayer immediately thereafter. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. When darkness veils His lovely face, I rest on His unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. His oath, His power, and His blood support me in the whelming flood. When all around my soul gives way, He is all my hope and stay.
Lengthen your knowledge, dear Lord, that everything He says will be true to your name, Lord. We pray You might be with those that are sick during this time, that You may be able to heal them, return them to their normal health, dear Lord. Be with those traveling, You might be with them and keep them safe through their travels. We pray You might be with us as we go throughout this week. It's in Your Son's name that we pray. Amen.
I had 12 things to do, and one of them was to put this microphone on, and I forgot. Okay, so first of all, with the kiddos, remember what we talked about last time on Sunday evening?
No.
Judith?
Pharaoh.
Pharaoh, that's right. Ethan, were you going to say something too? Or I heard some. Oh, okay. Were you going to say Pharaoh, or do you have something to add?
So Moses rolled one leg down the
Okay, so we talked about Pharaoh, but he wasn't really the focus of what we talked about last time, remember? So we covered that, but then there was some more that happened afterward. Ethan?
The plagues.
So the plagues we talked about, I think that was last Wednesday. That's right. And Silas is raising his hand like he has something to add. We went over those plagues, and we are going to sing that song so that we can all refresh our minds on that. But then what did we talk about after the plagues were over?
even do it.
Stephen? Yeah.
Well, because Pharaoh didn't let God's people go.
Pharaoh didn't let God's people go. That's right. And then after that, once he, well, I'll tell you what. Go ahead, Oliver.
The Passover?
Say it again.
The Passover?
Okay, so that's wrapped up with the final plague. Why don't we go ahead and do that song? Because it sounds like that's what all the kids are interested in right now is Pharaoh and the 10 plagues. So remember, Moses had told Pharaoh to let God's people go, and God said no. And so let's sing the song that starts with Pharaoh, Pharaoh, don't you know? Let's see. Titus, would you like to start it?
No.
How about you start it anyway? Don't you know you must let God's people go? If you don't, you'll have to pay. God will send and bless your way. Pharaoh, God will raise his hand and bring hardship to your land. Ruin, water, frogs, and lice, other things that are not nice. Lice and cattle, swords and hail, locust, darkness, doom, first nail. Okay, so that last one, the doom first nail, where God decided that he was going to kill all the firstborn of Egypt, that was what Oliver was talking about, the Passover. That was the first Passover for the Jewish people. And do you remember why it's called the Passover? Ethan?
Because death passed over Egypt.
Yeah, so let me make sure I heard that right. Say it again.
Death passed over Egypt.
Okay, so that's what I thought you said. Mostly right. Mostly right, okay? So God sent his angel to go and strike down the firstborn of Egypt. Oliver?
And everyone put blood on their door.
That's right. So God told the Israelites a way that they could have that angel and have that plague pass over them and skip them. So they would go, and so it would go and strike down the firstborn of the Egyptians. But the Israelites were told to kill the lamb and to put its blood on their doorposts, and that when God saw the blood, he would pass over them. Good job. Okay, so Pharaoh finally lets the people go. They get out of Egypt. They're going through the wilderness, and they come up to the Red Sea. How did they get past that? Oliver? Yeah, so God told him to raise up his staff, and when he did, the waters parted, and the Israelites walked through on dry ground. And then the Egyptians decided, well, they can do it, we can do it, right? What happened to the Egyptians when they ran in? Ethan?
They died.
Okay, that's right to the gist of it, right? Yes, Moses raised his hand again. The water went back to where they were in the first place and swept the Egyptians and their armies away. Okay, so now the people are free. They don't have to worry about the Egyptians chasing them down. But where are they? You know what we call? Go ahead, Lucinda. Say it again. Lost. That's fair. Yeah, they don't really know where they are. They're in a place where there's not a whole lot of other people. Oliver? They're not in the promised land yet, so God is going to take them there. But it takes a while for them to get to the promised land. And before that, he wants to take them to a particular spot. Sawyer? What? Is he saying wilderness? Yeah. Good job, buddy. Yes, so they're in a wilderness. They're lost, like Lucinda said. They're on their way eventually to the promised land, like Oliver said. But right now, they're stuck in the wilderness. So, they don't have food. They don't have a source of water. They don't know where they're going. What does God do about all this? Dominic? What does he do? I'll let you percolate on that for a little while, bud. How does God take care of their needs? Guys?
He gave them some water and some bread that tastes like honey.
The bread that tastes like honey, yeah. He gives them bread from heaven. They call what do they call the bread? Oliver? Oh, that's right, Oliver. Good job. And then Titus also said he gave them water. He did that on a number of occasions. The one that we talked about most last or on Sunday was when he made water come out of a rock in order to give them water to drink. Okay? And we didn't really touch on this last time, but Lucinda just mentioned a couple of minutes ago that they were lost. They didn't really know where they were going. They didn't really know where they were. And they're out in the middle of this wilderness. They don't really have any idea which direction they should even go. But God led them in a pillar of fire during the night and a pillar of cloud during the day, and they could follow that pillar and go wherever God took them. Does anybody remember where God took them next? Ethan?
Oh no, I was just pushing
Say
on my
again?
glasses.
Say
I was
again?
just pushing on my glasses.
He was just pushing up his glasses. We gotta get.
Well, that explains why I was struggling to figure out what he was saying. Sorry about that, guys. Where did God take them? Dominic, think you know? It was a particular mountain. You remember the name of the mountain? Lucinda? Mount Sinai. Good job. Okay. So that's where we're going to pick up, and we'll spend a couple minutes here talking about what happens next. In Exodus chapter 19, God has led the people to Mount Sinai, and he actually he sort of descends on the mountain in a cloud. Of course, we know God's not really in a cloud. He's not, in a physical form, but he's showing himself to the Israelites in that way. And they're all scared, as well they should be. It's pretty terrifying. They're at the foot of this mountain, and there's this dark cloud, and there's lightning, and these great sounds that are coming from it. They're very scared. Well, eventually, God speaks to them out of the cloud. And in Exodus chapter 20, let's read what he says. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving to you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. Okay, do you remember all those? There's a lot there, isn't there? Okay, it's hard. I understand. It's difficult to remember all of that, but we can condense it down a little bit. And the best way to do that is usually put it into a song, right? And that's what we've been doing. We've gone through several songs that you are either already knew or maybe I've taught them to you for the first time. Now, I know of a couple of Ten Commandments songs, and I have been struggling to find one that I thought was really good. I want to make sure that I just found this one this afternoon, and I'm not sure whether I'm really going to be able to teach it to you. Let me think about it for a second. Okay, I think I got the tune. So I'll sing it, and you guys can listen, and then we'll go through it another time or two, and hopefully you'll remember it fairly well. And we'll come back and we'll do it again Sunday afternoon and probably next Wednesday as well. You shall have no gods before me is my great command. And you shall not make any graven image by your hand. You shall not take my name in vain if you would guiltless be. Remember to keep the Sabbath day alone for me. Honor your father and your mother, and you shall not steal. You shall not commit adultery, you shall not kill. Do not lie and don't be jealous of other people's things. I am the Lord your God, and these are the 10 Commandments. Okay? You think you can remember that decently if we go through another time or two? I know there's still a lot. Jump in when you can. We'll go through it 2 more times in a row, and then we'll be done, okay? You shall have no gods before me is my great command. And you shall not make any graven image by your hand. You shall not take my name in vain if you would guiltless be. Remember to keep the Sabbath day alone for me. Honor your father and your mother, and you shall not steal. You shall not commit adultery, you shall not kill. Do not lie and don't be jealous of other people's things. I am the Lord your God, and these are the 10 Commandments. One more. You shall have no gods before me is my great command. And you shall not make any graven image by your hand. You shall not take my name in vain if you would guiltless be. Remember to keep the Sabbath day alone for me. Honor your father and your mother, and you shall not steal. You shall not commit adultery, you shall not kill. Do not lie and don't be jealous of other people's things. I am the Lord your God, and these are the 10 Commandments. Okay, we'll come back and we'll do that the next couple times as well, and hopefully we can all learn together. I'm still working on it myself. Thanks, guys. So, for the adults, we are in 1 Kings chapter 19. We've been studying Elijah for quite a while at this point, actually. I kind of had a feeling when we started that it was going to take more than just 1 week. I thought it might even take more than 2. I think we were on like part 3.5, something like that. And I actually don't anticipate finishing with him this evening either. But we'll have one more installment, and that will be it for Elijah. And we'll move on to something else. And in 1 Kings chapter 19, remember we've seen quite a lot from Elijah so far. We've seen him encounter several different situations. We've seen God's power demonstrated through him and through his predictions several times. And then right after, remember in chapter 18, he confronts these prophets of Baal. There's 450 of them, and God demonstrates his power over, the non-entity that is Baal, and Elijah kills all of these prophets. It's this wonderful, great victory. The drought ends. Everything seems to be going great. And then suddenly, at the beginning of chapter 19, he's running away. Why was that? Dominic thinks he has the answer to this one, too. I doubt it, buddy. Jezebel's after him, okay? So, it's not the first time somebody's been out for Elijah's life. But Jezebel, she's not a very nice person. Well, that's where we're going to pick up. We talked about, last week, we talked about him running away from Jezebel, and he was actually headed the same place that the Israelites were headed, to Mount Sinai. It's called Mount Horeb here, but it's referring to the same place. And we will pick up in 1 Kings 19. Who would like to read verses 9 through 14 for us? Go ahead.
And there he went into a cave and spent the night in that place. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And so he said, I have been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts. For the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. Then he said, go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. So it was, when Elijah heard it, that he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? And he said, I have been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life.
Thank you. Okay. How does his attitude here compare to what we saw from him before? Matt?
Immediately after the competition, for lack of a better word, with the prophets of Baal, he was very confident. Like, I don't want to say arrogant, but he was mocking them and pretty much openly showing that his God was the true winner. And now he's hidden away, not as confident, and has seemed to have lost some of that vigor that he had.
That's right. So one of the things that we kept saying about each new installment of the story, I would ask, what do you notice about Elijah? What stands out? And just about every time, one of the first two answers was he's very bold. And now we've got him running away, hiding in a cave, like Matt said. It just seems like something's a little bit off. He's maybe, and this is a little bit harsh, but I'm kind of exaggerating in order to make the point, I guess. He seems a little bit whiny, doesn't he? Like, compared to what we've seen from him before, now he comes across as, someone who's whining and complaining, and is just, he doesn't really cast the same character, the same respectable nature that we saw in him before, does he? Why is he shrinking from this latest attempt on his life? What makes this one different from the times before? Misty?
This time it seems more personal. It seemed like before she was after the prophets of the Lord. This time she's after Elijah specifically.
Okay, so certainly from the perspective of the person who is at the center of this issue, Jezebel, this is a lot more focused than the sort of general persecution against God's prophets. So that's part of it. But of course, as we read toward the beginning of chapter 18 in that same context, it's not just Jezebel who has sought his life before. Ahab, remember, had been going all over the place. The way that Obadiah says it is, I guess I'm on the wrong page. There we go. There is no nation or kingdom where my Lord, that's Ahab, has not sent to seek you. So it sounds like he has been chased very specifically. It was about him before, although not by Jezebel. So that has changed. Jezebel is a lot more focused. What else is different?
Well, he also just killed a bunch of people as well.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't just that he was talking about God and doing that. I mean, and it wasn't just that he commanded for them to be killed. Like, he physically killed them himself down by the river.
So it seems like maybe the stakes are a little bit higher, or it seems a little bit more serious. We're all involved. I think that's involved.
Yeah. Well, then he mentioned that the children of Israel had forsaken the covenant and killed the prophets, and because he says, I am left alone.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking he probably feels like he's totally alone. Of course, I don't know why he would think that with basically direct from God, but he just feels alone, and I'm sure that probably is part of it too.
And I think that's really the core of why we see this big change in him. Other things are at play here, of course, but I think that's the determining factor. He feels alone. He feels like it's a complete uphill battle, like there's nobody helping him. And yet, on Mount Carmel, after that demonstration, the people said, the Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. They're the ones who, at Elijah's command, seized the prophets and held them for Elijah to come through and execute them. So, why does he feel like that when a whole host of people assembled and agreed with him and said, yeah, we're with you? Why would he feel this way? Misty?
We talk about in the New Testament in Hebrews about we need to assemble to encourage one another. And I think, that there may be, obviously we think we see this with Elijah. He was leading the people, he had their support, and then when it came time to pray for the rain, and he sends Ahab back to Jezreel, and he goes out and runs ahead of him, he's by himself at this point. He's not with a group of people. And so I think that's something for us to remember, that, even Elijah, when left alone without the support that he had from other physical beings around him, he kind of get overwhelmed with that loneliness.
Overwhelmed is a great word for the way that he's got to feel here. He is alone in the sense that he's left from those people, so he doesn't have them nearby. And on top of that, remember we talked about this some last week, it's like Ahab is taking him seriously. The drought is now ended. It seems like things are looking up, right? It seems like he's won the greatest victory imaginable. The prophets of Baal are wiped out. It's made obvious to all the people, Baal is nothing, the Lord, He is God. The king is taking him seriously. It's like all these things are going so well, but yet they're really not. And I think that disappointment, what's the word I'm looking for, spurs on that feeling of being alone that Janet brought up, and especially because he is no longer with those people, like Misty said, and he's having to run for his life. He feels even more isolated. He feels even more disappointed than he ever had before, because it's like there's nothing left to do. There's nothing left that I could possibly say or do to these people in order to prove to them that they ought to be obeying God and following His law. And so it's like all this work that he has put in has been for nothing. He's exhausted. He feels like the fight ought to be over. That was supposed to be it. And yet, it's not over. It's still going. They're still seeking my life. So he runs away. He goes to speak to God on the mountain. Does anything stand out to you about the way that he speaks to God here? He doesn't really say very much. There are two times that he addresses God. One is in verse 10, and the other is in verse 14. Jen?
Well, it sounds like he feels like he has to tell the Lord, who knows, that he was zealous for him. I mean, I don't want to call it a lack of faith, because he's actually giving Jezebel more power, in his mind than God has. Or he wouldn't be, scared or feeling alone. I'm not quite sure if I understand. The only thing is I can think he's just in his own mind.
Yeah, and I think that's really what it comes down to. He's kind of closed in on himself a little bit. And it's not to say, I think you're right to sort of back away from just passing judgment and saying, oh, well, his faith has lapsed here and all. I think you're right. I don't think that's exactly what he's doing. But he is clearly, God asks him the question, why are you here? So he's answering, this is the way that I feel. And that's really what it comes down to. This is the way that I feel. That's his answer. Matt?
Well, I mean, honestly, he's just very human. It's self-preservation is a large part of what keeps, well, it's all of what keeps us alive.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you think about even Jesus had that inclination to self-preserve. He didn't want to die. He asked, you know, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. And that he had that human aspect to him. And it's the same here. Like Elijah, not only did he know that these people were after him, or specifically Jezebel was after him, but also he has the feeling he's all alone in the world. You know, you hear people say that, oh, I'm all alone in the world, but he legitimately thinks he's it, and she's hunting me, and what are you going to do?
He feels like he's completely powerless, and I'm sorry, go ahead, Misty.
Well, and to kind of add to that, I mean, the question was, why are you here?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I'm here because she's trying to kill me.
Right.
So, and then, I think it's interesting that even after God showed that, you know, all this powerful stuff he could do, and that it was just in the soft wind, he asked the question again, and it's almost word for word, because she's trying to kill me, basically.
I think it is, at least in the ESV, it is word for word, 100%. God asks him, and that's the main thing that really stands out to me. God asks, what are you doing here, Elijah? He says, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword, and I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. Okay, that's kind of a long, drawn-out, complicated sentence, but keep that in your mind. Verse 13, at the end of the verse, God says to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? He said, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword, and I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. God poses the question to him twice in the exact same words, and Elijah responds twice in the exact same words. And there's a separation of, we don't know how long this demonstration took, but I mean, it had to have taken a while in order for it to get across the majesty that God is obviously trying to demonstrate here. And then he comes and asks exactly the same question verbatim. And Elijah gives exactly the same answer verbatim. To me, it comes across as if it's rehearsed. Now put yourself in Elijah's shoes. You've had 40 days and 40 nights looking forward to conversing with God here on this mountain. And it's not a, yay, I'm getting to go spend some time with God situation. It's, I feel just completely wiped out here. I'm alone. I'm all that's left. I just went through what should have been the greatest victory that not just I've ever seen, but that the nation has ever seen from a religious perspective. Everything ought to be getting better, and yet it seems to be getting worse. And he's playing in his head, how is this going to go? What am I going to say? How am I going to converse with God? And he probably doesn't even know exactly how God is going to approach him. And when God does approach him and says, what are you doing here? Out it spills. What he's come up with, the things that he has decided to say, and God doesn't respond to it verbally. He responds, not verbally. He goes through this long demonstration, and then he comes back, and God asks exactly the same question. It's almost as if God is saying, I'm not quite satisfied with the answer you gave last time. But Elijah doubles down. He doesn't change. He says the exact same rehearsed thing. That was his answer the first time. Okay, we're going to come back to that and the interaction between them verbally in a minute here, but let's think about this demonstration. The wind, the rocks, the earthquake, the fire. What do all of those show to Elijah?
Power.
God's great power, his overwhelming, unimaginable power. It strikes me that that's not all that different from another demonstration of God's power that Elijah witnessed on another mountain not too long ago. Not identical, but there's several of the same elements here. Okay?
I mean, you almost think that God, I don't know what God thinks, but it's like maybe letting him know you're not alone. After he does all that with the lightning, the thunder, and all that, splitting the rock. This, you are not alone. Then he turns around and asks him again, and he still says, I'm alone.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know if he just didn't get. I mean, we're looking from the outside looking in.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not.
Armchair quarterbacking it.
Yeah, you can't really know what was really in his head, I guess.
But I think you're right on track for why God is doing this. He's trying to show him, okay, you might feel alone, but it's almost as if he's reminding him, did you forget what I just did? Did you forget what happened on that mountain? You were a big part of that. You trusted in me at that point. It was you against 450 prophets of Baal, 400 prophets of Asherah, and all of the people and the king, and you were fine. Because you knew you trusted in me. And now here you are, and suddenly it's as if that's not enough. So I think that's what he's trying to get across. You're not alone in the way that you think you are, and I'm here like I've always been. But there's more to it. What is the initial, why do you think God creates this contrast between all of that, the wind, the rocks, the earthquake, the fire, and then the low voice? Why does he speak to Elijah in a low whisper? Matt?
This is just a guess here, but to Janet's point, he's demonstrating that not only are you not alone, but so what if the whole world's after you? Look at the power I have. Look what I can do. He can not even snap his fingers, do nothing, and cause an earthquake to swallow everybody up. But even so, there's that human aspect to Elijah that he wants. It's good to talk to somebody else. And the demonstration's great and everything, but being able to have hey, I got you. Like, I've shown this, and now let's just talk. That's, from a mental standpoint, I think that would probably help some.
No, I think you're on the right track there. So God is showing not only his incredible power, but he's showing how he's also showing his great restraint, if that makes sense. He's showing his patience. He's showing that he has tight control over this unlimited power that he possesses. He approaches Elijah, and it's almost like, I'm thinking of here. This is something that you'll see in music that's really well crafted. You'll notice it from speakers who are really, really good at what they do, a lot better at it than I am, when they will create a big contrast between the dynamics, between volume, a really, really loud, powerful section. They can get your attention with something really soft. And it almost makes you perk up a little bit more, not because it was this loud shock, but because you might have been expecting something more like that. And instead, you get this very calm, soft, gentle approach. Misty?
Well, it's almost like when you think about our kids' relationship to us as parents.
Mm-hmm.
You want them, when they're little, they think of you as this awesome, powerful figure, but yet you want to handle them with kid gloves because you don't want them to be you. And a little bit of that, to me, comes through in this, and that he's showing I am this extremely powerful being, but yet I'm treating you like a child and like a son, and I'm treating you with these kid gloves because you're precious.
Exactly. He's demonstrating not only his amazing power, but the fact that he can be so gentle. He's getting Elijah's attention. He's comforting him. He's trying to help. So it's not that he is just completely slamming Elijah and saying, "Where's your faith?" He's meeting him where he is, and he is trying to help him. It's interesting that the initial effect of the voice on Elijah is that, let me find it here in verse 12. After the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire, and after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, "What are you doing here?" So it's like he has to seek it out. And that's, I think, also part of what God is trying to show with this demonstration. It's like he's saying, here are your options. You can have the wind and the earthquake and the fire and all this noise, all this chaos, these things that are terrifying. Or you can have me softly, gently, maybe even unnoticed, calmly directing things. Do you trust that I'm here? Even if I'm not appearing in, the thunder and lightning, in the great winds and the fires and the earthquakes. So he is trying to help Elijah. He sees Elijah's problem and he's trying to help him get past this issue. Okay, let's see. We could say a whole lot more about this interaction between Elijah and God, and we don't have time to cover it all. Or I think we're probably not going to understand it fully. There's more going on here than we're going to be able to comprehend. But there are some things that we can take from it. First of all, God shows Elijah that he has no ability to truly stand before the Lord. He tells him in verse 9, what am I thinking of here? Where is it? There it is, in verse 11. He tells him, go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. But then later in verse 13, Elijah hasn't done that apparently. He has to, he's still in the cave. He has to go out. And it's like God says, go out and stand before the Lord. Then he does this great demonstration, and then the low whisper, and Elijah still has to come out. Now, we're not told exactly what the details are there. Did he go out, and then did he take refuge back in the cave? I think that's probably what happened. He started to come out. He saw these terrifying things, and he retreated. He turned around, and he went back in where he'd be more safe, in the cave. And then he has to come back out. And when he does, it's as if he's kind of admitting that he cannot truly stand before the Lord of his own accord because he covers up his face. It's as if he's saying, I know better than to try to gaze at the Lord. And I don't know exactly what I'm getting into here. So I'm not going to look. And he wraps up his face. Jim?
Just a question. When during all that, broke the rocks and pieces before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it says after each thing, but the Lord was not in whatever it was.
Right.
What does that mean?
There's a very long and healthy debate about that. My take on it is pretty simple. It's just that Elijah might have been expecting those sorts of things, right? And seeing those as demonstrations of God's power, but that's not really where God was. And when God finally approaches him more clearly, it's in the still small voice. So there's a great, unfortunately it's not in the hymnal that we have now, but maybe one day we'll get to add into the next one way or another. There's a great hymn, trying to remember who wrote it now, but it doesn't matter, that is based on this exact interaction. And the way that the hymnist took this in the chorus of that hymn, I think is a pretty good way to understand it. It's faith is not in the thunder that rolls down the mountain. It's not in the lightning, the rain you release, but deep in communion is mercy and comfort, and within your presence there is peace. And so it's like God is showing his great power, but that's not really what Elijah needs, and that's not really what God is all about. He has that power, but what he really wants is this soft, calm, gentle interaction, kind of like Matt was getting at. Elijah's human. God realizes that. And he's willing to kind of stoop down, and as Misty was saying, handle him with kid gloves, treat him like a child, be very gentle with him. And I think that pretty much covers the rest of the things that I wanted to get out of that interaction. So, I'll tell you what. Let's finish this out, and then we'll wrap up our study of Elijah for tonight. Who would like to read verses 15 through 21? Denise, thank you.
And the Lord said to him, Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you have arrived, you shall anoint Hazael king over Aram, and Jehu the son of Nimshu you shall anoint king over Israel, and Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abel Mahad you shall anoint as prophet in your place. And it shall come about, and one who escapes from the sword of Hazael, Jehu shall put to death. And the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu, Elisha shall put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. So he departed from there and found Elisha the son of Shaphat while he was plowing with the 12 pairs of oxen before him, and he with the 12th. And Elijah passed over to him and threw his mantle on him. And he left the oxen and ran after Elijah and said, Please, let me kiss my father and my mother, then I will follow you. And he said to him, Go back again, for what have I done to you? 21?
21.
Okay. So he returned from following him and took the pair of oxen and sacrificed them and boiled their flesh with the implements of the oxen and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he arose and followed Elijah and ministered to him.
Thank you. Okay, so what Elijah might have wanted was some kind of a pep talk. Instead, what he gets is a reality check. So after God has asked him twice, what are you doing here? He gets Elijah's response. I'm the only one left. I've gone through all of this. I've always been jealous for you, and there's nobody else, and I'm the only one left, and they're trying to kill me now. And he just passes right over that and says, okay, here's the deal. So I want you to go on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, which is all the way up in the north. So he started, remember, Mount Carmel, toward the northern end of the nation of Israel. He went down to the Jezreel Valley. He ran. He's probably exhausted from that. Then he runs away from Jezreel. He goes all the way down to Beersheba in the south, goes through the desert, all the way down south to Mount Sinai. And God says, turn around and go all the way back up to the north, to the northern end of Israel, and find Hazael and anoint him king. He just gets right down to business, doesn't he? He says, you got work to do, buddy. But he's also not ignoring Elijah's concerns. We've seen the way that he approaches him and the way he's trying to be gentle and help him out. And first of all, the instructions that he's giving Elijah are exactly the sort of thing that Elijah, needed to know were God's plans. Like, okay, I've got plans here. Hazael and Jehu are going to put to death basically all the people that are threatening your life. Also, this is your job. This is why I called you. I need you to be about this business. And he also doesn't completely ignore Elijah's response. He does address it directly and says, I will leave 7,000 in Israel. All the knees who have not bowed to Baal, every mouth that has not kissed him. So he's throwing in again, verbally, at the end, you're not alone. And Elijah's response is simple, straightforward obedience, which is a good example for us to follow. We've got more to cover, a little bit more in 1 Kings and 2 Kings, and one little story in 2 Chronicles. Hopefully we can fit those in next week before we finish out our study of Elijah. Anything else? Any comments or questions? All right, thank you.
You want to go and take the Bible and open up to 2 Timothy chapter 2. 2 Timothy chapter 2. Chapter 3. So we've been working with Sawyer on saying the books of the Bible, and he had a pretty good grasp of them. He can do the whole Old Testament himself, and most of the New Testament he likes to skip the 2 Peter. So as soon as he started to say first and second, everything first and second was automatically first and second. And he got pretty good at it, where that was really his only slip up, and then we kind of moved on to some other things and had kind of gotten away from doing those as much as we had been. We've been doing them every day, and we started with learning 5 at a time. We basically do 5 at a time for a week, and it worked out really good. It came up very quick, and he's got a much younger mind than I do, and so it's a lot easier to shape and mold it. Well, as we kind of moved on to other things, talked about the Spirit and some other stuff, he picked those up really good too. But recently we've kind of gone back and like, hey, let's say the Bible, and he's messing up, and the Old Testament, which he had that like the back of his hand. And so we're kind of having to go back and not relearn, but just kind of practice those again and get back in those habits. And he's picking it up again. He's doing a great job of it. It's a good reminder, though, of how important practice is and how important it is for us to continually be learning, continually, even the things that we know and the things that we know, we still have to be diligent to make sure that we're staying on top of those, keeping our minds fresh on those. And, I'll say firsthand myself that, at work, we do different presentations throughout the year where we kind of take note of how our performance is, kind of present our territory, present on our job and the things that we've done and how we've impacted the business. And as we do those, it's a good time to shine and, hear the things I've done, here's what I've done good. But it's also a good reminder to us as we're reviewing those numbers and reviewing our performance before we even get to that review to recognize some areas where, I haven't done it in this category, or I haven't done as good at this, and I need to put some focus on this and get back to learning this. And this was a good example for me. So, what I'm saying tonight, I'm certainly preaching to myself as well, because I admit I haven't done as good a job as studying as I should have. And it's easy for us to get caught up with, well, I know the Bible, I know the basics, I know these things, I know what you need to do to be a Christian, but if we don't stay on top of that, how easily it can leave us, how easily we can get distracted by other things. So, if you would, look at 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verses 16 and 17. It says, all scripture is given by the inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete and thoroughly equipped for every good work. So most of us can quote that. It's a very common passage that we look at frequently, but what does it really mean? All scripture is given by the inspiration of God. Okay, simple enough. Scripture comes from God. It's profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness. So a lot of times we may look at that and think about others when we look at that, okay? So reproof, correction, instruction in righteousness. If there's someone that's a wayward Christian or someone that's not a Christian, that's what it's here for. But in reality, that can apply to us as Christians just as much as anybody else. Just like those performance reviews I was talking about, it's a good opportunity to look at ourselves and examine our performance. That's what the scriptures do. Just because we're a Christian doesn't mean the job's over. We talk about once saved, always saved, and how that's not a thing. Despite what a lot of people will teach, that is not a thing. We have to stay strong. We have to stay diligent. So, as important as it is to, like it says here, use this for correction, for reproof, for instruction for others, it's equally, actually I'd say it's more important that we take care of ourselves. It gets into the take the speck, the plank out of your own eye before you remove the speck from your brother. We have to make sure that we're doing and handling our own business and that we are right with God. If you would look over at Joshua chapter 1 and verse 8. You look at Joshua and a lot of the things that he says. You go to Joshua and immediately everybody, for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. In fact, there's probably a number of people here that have that somewhere on a wall or on a picture frame or somewhere in your house because it's very common. But if we look at verse 8, God's instructing Joshua here and says, this book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Now you can say, well, this is the Old Testament. We don't live under the old law anymore. But this still rings true. This rings true for Sawyer learning his books of the Bible. This rings true for anybody in school that's learning something. You have to stay on top of these things. You have to continually be studying these things, and that's what God warns here is keep this close. Keep this close so that it will not depart from you, so that you can always be able to handle yourself according to what is written in the law. And it's no different for us today. So if you're here tonight and you're not a Christian, well, the steps you have to take, it's easy to know where you stand. And we can handle that tonight. We've got a baptistry right here. We can take care of that. Or if you are a Christian and maybe you haven't been doing those things, it may not be something publicly that you have sinned. It could be like myself, where I've realized, hey, I haven't been studying as good as I should. I've got to get better about this. I've got to get in better habits so that I don't forget these things, so that I can maintain these things. But if it is something publicly that needs to be addressed, we're here for you tonight, and we can handle it here. So if there's anyone that needs to respond, please come forward and stand and say.
Sorry not when thou didst come to this poor world of sin and death, nor yet beheld thy cottage home in that despise and handsome room. But we thy footsteps trod in streets and plains, thou Son of God. But we believe thy footsteps trod in streets and plains, thou Son of God. We saw thee not and lifted high, amid their wild and savage crews, nor heard me bell in glory cry, for did they know not what they do, but did we thy that shook the earth and built the sun. But we the deep was strong that shook the earth and built the sun. We gaze not in the open tomb, where once I lay, nobody lay, nor saw thee in that upper room, nor read beyond the open grave. But we believe that angels said, why seek the living with the dead? But we believe that angels said, why seek the living with the dead? We walk not with the chosen few, who saw thee from the earth ascend, who raised to hell their wandering view, then low to earth all prostrate down. But we have human eyes beheld that journey to the skies. But we that human eyes beheld that journey to the skies. Again, to see everybody here at midweek. Please let me know if you have to work tonight. Tim is away from us working as well. have any specific updates regarding Justin and his family. As far as I know, Fletcher and Jenna should be coming out of quarantine pretty soon. Looking forward to seeing them Sunday, as long as everything holds up. Logan was supposed to be doing our closing prayer. Obviously, he is not here tonight. Scott, I'm going to ask if you could word that for us in a moment. Before Scott dismisses us in a closing prayer, are there any other things we need to make mention of yet this evening? Yes, the latest class, thank you. Tomorrow evening over Zoom. Any other things we need to bring up? Mark Mason also out of town. We can hear Alan there. There is nothing else. Scott will dismiss us with closing thoughts.
Our loving and glorious Father in heaven, we come before you today for this opportunity that we're able to come together and serve you and study more about your word. We ask, Father, you be with those who weren't able to be with us, all those that are facing sickness, that you will watch over them and help them return with us. We're so thankful, Father, for the way you take care of us, the way you watch out for us. Ask, Father, as we continue to go out the rest of this week, that you'll be with us in everything we say. We ask, Father, you continue to be with the church here, that we will always stand for what's right and what you have us to do. Ask all these things in Jesus' name.